The college has a responsibility to protect itself from liability by setting limits and maintaining standards. This is usually in the form of a policy which sets out the ground rules for the use of technologies in learning. As we heard in the background videos, inspectorates are charged with the responsibilities of reviewing and assessing how colleges safeguard their learners. With the current thinking on self-evaluation and its effectiveness in improving institutions, inspectorates seem to be asking colleges to self-review. One way of providing evidence of safe practices is to have in place an effective, appropriate and embedded e-safety policy. This, of course, doesn't mean that one individual writes a policy, it's put up on the college website and the college can tick the box. It's much more than that. An essential element to this is the discussion and consultation that will take place at the initial stages, identifying key messages for all users. In writing an e-safety policy, a college has the opportunity to highlight issues, behaviours, responses and so on, and to ensure that they are safeguarding learners effectively. And of course, any policy should be reviewed periodically to identify any weaknesses or areas of development. JISC Legal has produced a summary checklist to help colleges when formulating their e-safety policies. It's in the form of questions to be answered and considered by your institution, and the good news is it's only one side of A4. I'll go through and expand on this now. It's important that the policy reflects your college as a whole, and so content may be slightly different according to your own circumstances and college community. All stakeholders, governors, staff, parents and especially learners should have input in the creation of any policy document that affects them. This will give them ownership and embed good practice. All staff and learners should be aware of their rights and responsibilities before using ICT at the college. The policy should be clear, concise, not too long, and use appropriate language and tone to be easily understood. It should be broad in scope, listing who it applies to and in what circumstances, and it should take account of emerging technologies. You don't want to limit it, for example, to the use of the fixed PC. Link your e-safety policy with others, for example, your acceptable use, e-security, Web 2, anti-bullying, disciplinary and child protection policies. Have an incident recording procedure in place. Include clear guidelines on how to report and include examples of acceptable and unacceptable behaviours. This will make things easier for users, and a useful starting point for this might be the JANET acceptable use policy. Share and raise the profile of your policy and principles through education and training of staff and learners, for example, at induction periods or during classes. Make use of partnership support, know who the relevant parties are, and provide more information, some online sites that offer guidance perhaps, resources to highlight staying safe online. Unfortunately, things can and do go wrong sometimes. The college must firstly ensure their response is immediate and prevents any further harm occurring, and that any incident is dealt with appropriately and recorded. Procedures for this should be contained within your e-safety policy. This might be easier for users in a grid format or a flowchart. There should be clear guidelines that state to whom and how an e-safety incident should be reported. Does everyone know who that person is? Is there an e-safety officer? Or perhaps this is the remit of the child protection officer. This person should, if possible, be a senior member of staff. Consider in what circumstances the matter should be reported externally, for example to the police or CEOP, the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, or the Internet Watch Foundation. It might also be useful to tell users about the report abuse options on some social networking sites such as Facebook and Bebo. Make your response to any incident proportionate. Consider whether the act was accidental or deliberate, and where the act was inappropriate or unacceptable, this might be dealt with under the Student Code of Conduct, Behaviour Policy or Acceptable Use Policy. Any subsequent investigation carried out by the college should be in line with policy, so that all those involved know exactly what will be happening and why. Where there is illegal activity, this should be reported to the police. Don't investigate this yourself. Record all incidents and actions and monitor any outcomes, and have a joined-up response with adequate supports. In deciding on your policy content, think ahead. Audit your own current e-safety procedures and practices. We've already mentioned that there are resources that will help you do that. Formulate an action plan. Select a committee to write your e-safety policy, and importantly, have clear lines of responsibility for e-safety. Provide training for learners and staff on the responsible and safe use of IT, as well as what they should do if something does go wrong. Have a centralised and consistent, clear reporting procedure in place, and know about sources of support and partnerships that you can rely on. Update your policy and procedures regularly to take account of changes in technology, and consult with all stakeholders, including learners. You might consider testing the effectiveness of your policy with a focus group of staff, learners, parents, members of the community if appropriate, and consider carefully any feedback you're offered. At the end of the day, a policy will only be effective where it's supported by infrastructure, training, education, and where there's informed agreement of all users. It should reflect your college community as a whole and be embedded within everyday practice. This e-safety policy checklist is now available for you to download on the new e-safety theme on our website.